Good evening, everybody. I am John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives too, and it's Wednesday night, and every other Wednesday, we have been enjoying a conversation with David Underdown. So David's back with us tonight. Thanks for joining us again, David.
Thanks for having me again.
Well, it's a great pleasure. I think the last time we were headed towards 9:30, and I realized my head just couldn't keep up any longer. I think we might have to keep it to an hour tonight, just because I know it's been already been quite a eventful day for us here. Just a lot of stuff going on. That's all. Nothing in particular. But boy, it looks nice there where you are. That's a great background you got. You're looking like a video star now, man. That looks great.
Trying to keep up with Andy and his info wars. So yeah, no, I'm very fortunate. I have a beautiful house and beautiful landscaping with a semi-celebrity landscape architect that did the project up at Mackinac Island at the Grand Hotel, which is famous for the largest porch in the United States, is up at Mackinac Island, and he did the landscape work there, and he did two projects at the property that I live on now. So it's very nice.
Excellent. And well, I enjoyed having a conversation. Oh, there goes my light. I'm sorry. That light seems to be going on and off without. I'm sorry for that. Um, we were talking a little bit earlier today about the University of Michigan, the Ford Foundation, and your recent research into what they've all been doing. And I was interested to see in one of your tweets that you referred to a visit to Detroit by none other than Aleister Crowley, the,
Hmm.
the famous Tavistock writer and very occult. It doesn't say half of it. I mean, just let's just say beyond creepy occult associated with the Tavistock Institute, the Rhodes Round Table, and all of the creeps of London, to put it in a nutshell.
Yep.
Uh, Tell us more about the visit of Aleister Crowley, and more about what you've been able to study about the University of Michigan itself, the Ford Foundation, and what's really been going on.
Well, as everybody knows, Ford is famous for being a big part of the arsenal of democracy, and it has interesting ties to the military industry, obviously, with Willow Run, which we've talked about quite a bit. They had the B-24 bomber plant, and there was a big transition with the Ford family going from the automotive into the foundation, the Ford Foundation, and there's a lot of very interesting firsts that come from the Ford Foundation. One being PBS was a Ford Foundation project, but as far as the Aleister Crowley, um, there's a very famous fresco at the Detroit Institute of Art, which is the uh, the Industry of Detroit mural by Diego Rivera. And in that mural, he mostly is inspired by the Ford Rouge plant, which was the largest manufacturing facility in the world, which is in River Rouge, Michigan, just south of Detroit on the Detroit River. And he also includes a part of it with he also went to a pharmaceutical company, which most people don't know of because it's sort of gone now. It was called Park Davis, and it was famous for being the first pharmaceutical company that could mass produce pills. And it also had it also was doing cocaine. So that was like Bayer had the heroin patent. Um, Park Davis had cocaine, and apparently Aleister Crowley was somebody that visited Detroit, and he had, been experimenting with peyote, and apparently Park Davis was able to, manufacture it in a way that he felt was greatly improved. Um, in that mural that you're showing there, there's a scene with the a baby that's like almost like a manger scene with Jesus, where they are vaccinating the baby, and that's of course Jonas Salk was somebody that was at the University of Michigan working on the polio vaccine, and the Detroit Institute of Art, has, the Fords came in the teens and the 20s. The original the original Detroit industrialist that really brought the DIA was the Scripps and the Booth family, which has ties to me because my father's childhood best friend was Peter Booth, and his grandparents were the founders of Cranbrook School, which is a private school in Bloomfield Hills, which has quite a few famous people, but that went to school there. Um, but but basically, the Scripps were you know very involved in the DIA. They had a famous. They recruited the curator from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, Valentiner, who was a German that came over and was the one that commissioned the Rivera to do that mural. So, and again, without personal connections, Edsel Ford was. His wife was the heiress to the Hudson Motor, but also the Hudson Department Store, which was the big department store in Detroit, which the stocks for both of those companies was the majority shareholder was Princess Beatrice, who was the royal of the Dutch. So it makes me think that Hudson is a tie back to the old Henry Hudson, the explorer that did the Hudson River, Hudson Bay Company, and whatnot. But there's the section of the Detroit the industry mural that features the sort of the very early vaccination. As they got the different animals that they use, and that was Park Davis. So again, with tying back to a lot of the stuff that Bill Taylor and Mark and George and you and the first charrette that I didn't attend with the Gibson Island, the person that was running a library at Wayne State was Dr. Neil Gordon, and Dr. Neil Gordon was the man that organized the Gibson research conferences, and they were called the Gordon Research Conferences. And the person that was his advisor was the chief chemist from Park Davis. His name was Harvey Merker. And again, that Harvey Merker was somebody that was friends with my dad's family, and actually was the one that that had my mom and dad introduced them. My mom was from Indiana. She'd been a Michigan State teacher, education, and she'd moved to Birmingham, where we live, and she was teaching at the Franklin School in Franklin, Michigan, which was part of the Birmingham schools then. And the Merkers were the ones that set them up. So again, with it's there's a lot of intrigue is for me, studying that, but it does, I think, go to the sort of the bigger picture of things. And I think for the Fords and the Ford Foundation is an interesting link with obviously with their influence in the development of industry in the United States.
Well, we do have that portion of the mural now to look at, and it's really freaky.
Mm-hmm.
The little baby's there, and he has some kind of a glow around his skull, around his head, like he's a almost like a Roman mosaic of Jesus or something. But not sure what that means. I don't think he's grown any hair yet. He's still in a diaper. But the doctor there is sticking him right in the arm with a needle. And this would have been done when, Dave, approximately when would this piece of art have been done?
I think it was 1932 that they did it. Rivera,
Okay.
he was living with, Frida was in, she has another interesting, the Ford Hospital painting by Frida is horrifying. That's another, you know,
Let,
sad.
let's let's get to that. I'm not familiar with it, but I want to finish up with this little portion of the Diego Rivera industry mural because it looks to me like they're saying the future is in vaccination.
Hmm.
And this is 1932, David,
Yep.
or maybe a few years later if you're not exactly right. But I mean this is before Hitler takes over. This is something that has got to have been generated through the thoughts of the sponsors of the mural, don't you think? I mean, I don't think that there was enough vaccination going around, as a practice, and then of course to put the animals there that you say are involved in the production of the vaccines. I wonder what they thought was in the needle. I wonder what they thought that did they have a universal vaccine in mind, just like we seem to think that they've got a universal vaccine for the influenzas and things that they're working on now. And I'm really kind of appalled to see
Yeah.
this glorification of sticking needles in children's arms that goes all the way back to 1932. Park Davis, can you connect them a little bit more for us to today, and who were they, and why were they associated with Detroit?
Well, they. I have a couple thoughts on that. The one was, going back again to the Guardian building, which was where they had the War Industry Board was run out of the Guardian building in Detroit. The person that really financed that was named Dexter Ferry, and it's a different spelling than Danny or than David Ferry, but he had the largest seed company in the world, and that was originally in Traverse City, Michigan. And the original Michigan Railroad, I think, was to sort of bring, he invented the seed packets, and he's also the one that sponsored the Ferry Field at University of Michigan, which was um, the football stadium before Michigan Stadium. But it has an interesting connection because Jesse Owens qualified for the Olympics as an Ohio State track star at Ferry Field in Ann Arbor, and then of course goes to Germany in the 1934 Olympics and is sort of the star of the Olympics. Lenny Riefenstahl makes the Olympia movie, to showcase that event. Um, but Dexter Ferry, he was the kind of the spirit header of the Guardian building. Also, Macmillan, who was the senator, he did the Macmillan Plan, which was the addition to the mall, the National Mall in Washington D.C., and a couple other interesting industrialists in Detroit. I'm trying to think of all the key ones. Alger, who was involved with McKinley and Roosevelt. There's Dexter Ferry. So his seed business was had the largest seed. So again, the Park Davis was going all over the world. Like an East India Company or a Dutch West India Company, trying to find different plants to use for medicinal purposes. It's interesting timing because as far as the vaccines, the Spanish flu was a major event in the 1918. So that was something that was probably on the minds of a lot of people as far as the push to create vaccines for mass plagues or pandemics. But he was somebody that, again, is, Detroit is just full of names that nobody knows, that I think have significance. But I'm always interested in sort of pulling them up because it's now it became Warner Lambert for a while, and then it became Pfizer, which is in the news today. Today with their COVID vaccine. So it's just an interesting chain, because again, Detroit, like you can go by the original plant, which was the first mass producer of pills. You had the whole Rockefeller medicine that was trying to use petroleum to make a pill-based medicine. The they were getting away from the holistic medicines and things like that. And then of course with my dad's mother's family, they were very long-term Michigan medical school people, which when you look at the creation of a school like John Hopkins, with the I believe it's Andrew Colt Gilman. They had the
Daniel, I think, isn't it?
Daniel Colt Gilman, correct, right? He the I'm trying to think of the name of the paper that was that they sort of created the new practices for medical schools with the new standards. But U of M was one of the, like, I think eight med schools that was listed as being accredited, like Hopkins and University of Chicago and Case Western. Just again, this is going back to the teens when they created that. But it's just again, they really wanted to get a hold on the new medical standards. We talked about Sloan Kettering and the sort of discovery of radium and X-rays and using that for diagnosis, and again, getting away from holistic medicines and Eastern medicines. And so again, Detroit's an area that you don't think of, but then with that Kresge Hooker Library, that was I think was a and again, with Neil Gordon being the person managing that at Wayne State, I think they were going to Gibson Island, and they were bringing in people, doctors, medical people from all over the world. And you always want to think of it as being for helping people and giving wellness. But sadly, what we're learning is that there's a chemical and a biological weapon program that I'm sadly think is connected with it as well.
Yeah, it has to be. And we've uncovered so much. Or forgive me for the lights. I don't know what's going on. I'll have to look into that camera problem. But I'll tell you what. Let's bring David up onto the screen. And
Well, as far as again, getting back to Neil Gordon, he was somebody that when he went to Gibson Island, he was staying at the home of Stuart Symington, who again was somebody that was involved with he was the Secretary of Navy. He was the head of Emerson Electric that did a lot of work with with a lot of the more of the radar type weapons systems. Or we talked about with the Manhattan Project, the proximity fuse, and with radar being kind of the three super projects for World War II. And again, with the Ford Foundation, if you look at the history of their background, they had a man named Horace Roland Gaither that was from California. He was he started the Rand Corporation. He started Raytheon was, out of MIT. He worked at MIT, and he also created the first not hedge fund, but it was called let's see, it was Gaither, Anderson, and the third guy worked for Dylan Reed. I can't think of his last name, but again, Dylan Reed was the investment bank that had a lot of interesting transactions. They were the ones that bought the Dodge Corporation. They had a lot of they were one of the large financiers of both the German redevelopment, but also a lot of bonds were for the Russian war effort. And again, I always try to be aware that Russia was our ally for World War II before they became our enemy, the communist enemy. And again, with Detroit having connections, besides the auto industry, the man that was commissioned to basically do the 5-year plans for Stalin was Albert Kahn, who was a Detroit architect that built a lot of the Ford and GM plants, but he also built, I think, over 600 factories in Russia, and he also led the training program for the architectural school there. So when we get into the the auto bailout from the 2008, with the intrigue of Oleg Deripaska being involved in those transactions, there's a long history of Detroit, working with the Russians, but also with the Germans. So it's something that is not really talked about, but it is it's a fact, and you can also see in there that he was the first chairman of the MITRE Corporation, which was Nellie Orr was a MITRE person, and then just looking at all, again with MIT, that was that was Vannevar Bush, who also has a medical history, because he was somebody that not only was the head of the Carnegie Corporation, he also became, when George Merck passed away, he became, I don't know if he was the chairman or the CEO, but George Merck was the one that started the Fort Detrick project. So there's a lot of connections with MIT, also with the DuPonts, because they were the ones that really financed a lot of their early laboratories. DuPont was very interested in experimenting with different fuels and things like that, and they really were the ones that boosted that MIT engineering program. And again, like we talked about last time with John Jacob Raskob and Pierre DuPont and Alfred Sloan at General Motors. DuPont and GM were the same company for many years before they were broken apart by the Reconstruction Finance Committee. So just a lot of connections with Ford, and then with the Rand Corporation is something I'm always really interested in, because I do think that they were the big PR. I mean, you talked about Crowley and his influence in England as far as the Tavistock and their kind of public relations / influence campaigns. I really feel like the Rand Corporation was the American version of that.
We you've covered so much, and I keep thinking, oh wow, I want to know more about this guy, know more about this guy and that guy. The first one I did grab was Horace Rowan Gaither from Wikipedia, and I don't know anything about this man. So, and these connections just are astounding. First of all, he was from San Francisco, an investment banker,
Hmm.
a powerful administrator of the Ford Foundation, says Wikipedia. Powerful.
Yep.
During World War II, he served as assistant director of the Rad Lab at MIT. So he's working directly with Vannevar Bush. And he helped to found the Rand Corporation and served as a trustee until 1959. So 48 to 59, for that's very consistent with the Cold War and, from the beginning of the CIA in 47. Um, then let's move on to the MITRE Corporation. This is also a huge connection. As you pointed out, Nellie Orr was involved in MITRE Corporation. Is just some big uh, money funnel for the CIA? How would you describe the MITRE Corporation?
MITRE is one that I am not as familiar with their role. I know that MIT, out of that MIT Rad Lab, they had Raytheon, which was a big um, air defense contractor. The Rand Corporation was one that went to, I always kind of pair them with the Jet Propulsion Lab and Caltech and Rand as sort of being sort of a three-way partnership. With again, you get into your paperclip situation there. I also another key group that was in that JPL group was the Guggenheims, and I didn't know that they actually were the original. They sort of apparently got out of the mining and went into aerospace, and they were working on the long range missile program out of. And basically, the Jet Propulsion Lab was the successor to the Guggenheims. They were the ones that brought in um, von Karman. They also, I'm trying to think who else was and again with MIT and the Manhattan Project with Vannevar Bush, you also had the Compton brothers, and then you had the Millikins, and Millikin he was the one that apparently recruited a lot of these Germans to that were part of the V1, the V2. I remember long ago George Webb saying that that the Germans really their aerospace supersonic flight programs were far ahead of the American aerospace, and that was a big draw for the Manhattan Project was to get those missile people into these national labs to for the Americans.
You mean the Paperclip project?
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, Albert Kahn,
Okay.
another name that I really am not very familiar with, and as you said yourself, a lot of these names we should be familiar with them. So let's talk a little bit more about him with this background. May 8th, 1929. I'm reading from Wikipedia here. I guess I should put that up on the screen for folks, and I am gradually learning how to do these things. Here we go. Okay, Albert Kahn, on May 8th, 1929, through an agreement signed with Kahn by Saul G. Bron, Bron, the president of Amtorg, the Soviet government contracted Albert Kahn Associates to help design the Stalingrad tractor plant, the first tractor plant in the USSR. And I can tell you, I have recently been, it's been about 3 or 4 months now. I've been completely addicted to a YouTube channel that is focusing on the Battle of Stalingrad. And it's called Tick, if anyone's interested, TIK. And this guy has gone through from from way back in June all the way into the winter, with detailed maps and all kinds of analysis. But the Stalingrad tractor plant was the goal. I mean, that was one of the major goals of the German Sixth Army was to try to capture that tractor plant. And all they finally did capture the tractor plant, it was just too late. They had already overextended their supply lines and um, gotten nearly encircled. And in terms of the show I've been watching, they're just now right now getting ready to get fully encircled by the Red Army. So the Stalingrad tractor plant, to me, stands out as a historic symbol of a big lie. And the big lie is that we were opposed to Soviet Russia. We were not opposed to Soviet Russia. We were financing Soviet Russia, and that where I'd like you to start with Albert Kahn and possibly bring in some George Shultz or anybody else you want.
Okay. If you tap on Amtorg, that's a very important group to know with Saul Braun, because they also were partnered with Arcos, which was the English version of it. And then they also had a character that, again, is somebody that everyone should know, is Armand Hammer, because he is the Occidental Petroleum. He's also involved in the Doctor's plot. His sister, I believe, was in the Doctor's plot. And he, is the benefactor of, Al Gore and Al Gore's father, Albert Gore Sr. And Al Gore, Hillary gets a lot of heat for the uranium one, but from what I'm learning, it's Al Gore is the one to look at, because he's the one that negotiated not only the privatization of the Elk Hills, which was the strategic petroleum reserve, but he's also the one that brokered the megatons to megawatts deal, which again ties in to it ties in, if you want to talk George Shultz, he was one of the founders of the Nuclear Threat Initiative, with Kissinger, and with Sam Nunn, who was the, Nunn-Lugar Act was the non-proliferation agreement. But they also are, there's just a lot of crossover with, even with the studying what Hunter Biden was up to as far as his dealings with the Chinese, and with G Lang. I'm trying to think. It's what the name of his. He was involved with the signing this Russian and Chinese agreement as part of the Belt and Road to provide petroleum with Rosneft, which, again, Rosneft is the Russian petroleum, national petroleum company. It has Oleg Deripaska, who was involved, in Rosneft. It has Glencore, which was Mark Rich, going back to the overthrow of Iran in 79. And then it also has Gerhard Schroeder, who was the chancellor of Germany before Angela Merkel, and he is the not only the chairman of the board of Rosneft, he's also the chairman of the Nord Stream 2, which is another project that's in the news a lot right now. And he's an agent of Rothschild. So you've got you've got the British, the German, and then you have Mark Rich in there, and then you have Rex Tillerson, who was Secretary of State under Trump. He was the chairman of Exxon. So again, it to me, it goes back to that original brownable petroleum in the Baku, which was Noble, it was Rothschild, and it was Teagle from Exxon. It was called Standard Oil of New Jersey at the time, but it's the same characters. I mean, they've rebranded them, but again, as far as Al Gore in there negotiating these deals, a lot of crossover in the people. And then the other, for me, the other great intrigue is that Rosneft, their American attorney, was Spalding and King from Atlanta, and Sam Nunn was the, um, when he wasn't a senator, he was, chief counsel for Spalding and King. And Spalding and King has Christopher Wray, before he became FBI director. He was there. You have Sally Yates was there. You have Rod Rosenstein currently there. So, it's just the same characters. And then, Bill Barr was at, he was on the, Alpha Bank side, but everyone's talking about the Alpha Bank as far as being being suspected of doing the DNC hacking, but everybody leaves out the Spectrum Health part, which was the DeVosses in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So you've got Dick DeVos, who's married to Betsy, who was the education secretary, and then her brother is Eric Prince, and his Frontier Services Group is doing the security for that Rosneft, and I think it's CEFC is the Chinese partner in that deal.
Can
But again,
can 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 we find something on that? I'm intrigued. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah,
I don't want to lose my train of thought. The Belt and Road Initiative is absolutely huge with my friends over at the Schiller Institute and the LaRouche organization, as you probably know. So one of the issues that I have is most of my subscribers, chat people, the people that I interact with, are highly suspicious of China as a totalitarian state, and that when they claim we've relieved the poverty of 900 million people, and everybody goes, yeah, right, because nobody takes that seriously. The idea that China might actually be a democratic force, or a force for freedom or goodness in the world, it's just too far fetched for most people. But not for my friends at the Schiller Institute, who really do believe that the Belt and Road Initiative is the answer to war. Is if we can get everybody working together to facilitate the transportation of goods and services, that is all. It's all a unifying thing worldwide as far as providing the transportation system, but at the same time letting all the countries remain sovereign, not trying to create a one world order. And with that kind of framework, I can be comfortable. I could say, yeah, I like the idea of a Belt and Road, because then all the transportation systems are lined up, and it's more efficient, and probably everything will be cheaper. And you can get stuff faster. I don't know, but the idea of transportation is a good thing. It seems to me it's like it's conducive to peace, because if everybody can get everything they need, then there's no need for war. I like the idea. Now, why is Hunter Biden involved in some big deal involving the Belt and Road? You really surprised me with that. And if you have anything more that you can, any more detail, or is there a name of it? I'll try to find
well,
it on the internet.
the guy, I think his name was Yi Jia Jing. He's the one that gave him the diamond. Remember he got the $80,000 diamond that was
Oh, that
handed.
was in the paper today, or on the Twitter today, about him getting some big diamond.
So, but he was he's basically out of the pit. As far as I can tell, he's not. They bankrupted him. But the connection that I think that is more important is the getting into the Burisma, because Hunter Biden was working. He was working with Burisma, but the real player in Burisma was Kofor Black, and Kofor Black, you know, was again, like going back into the sort of the Safari Club era, he was involved in that. He was the head of the Bin Laden task force under George Tenet, um, and he was Blackwater also. So he was with Blackwater, which was Eric Prince's company, and also with Total Intelligence, which was all a different a rebranding. But when you get into the Frontier Services, which is a South African and a Hong Kong based company, they were doing the security. You can, go on their website. They were involved with the English SCL, which was Cambridge Analytica, which was also in the, sort of the dossier and the whole, Trump Russia collusion story. Frontier Services was one of the partners with the Mercers, but they were also the ones that were partnered with this XPCC, which is the, we talked about this a couple shows ago. That was sort of the private security firm that was created by Mao Zedong. And the man that ran it was somebody that originally was affiliated with Chiang Kai-shek and then flipped to run this, this basically the Blackwater of China. And they, and again, when you get into the whole Iran-Contra affair and the Operation Cyclone in Afghanistan with the whole, Mujahideen, they were brought in. They were shut down and they restarted them in the, whatever, 78 to help assist with that effort, which, again, was Koger Black and Armitage and Casey and, the, I'm trying to learn all the names of the characters, but again, it's the same group. It's like they changed the names of the, they go from the Belgian, relief to the World Wildlife Fund, to the Safari Club, to now I think it's Frontier Services, but it's it's the same kind of groups. And again with Eric Prince, he was he was really connected with Dana Rohrabacher, who was the congressman from California that he was the one that has the story about him, drunk arm wrestling with Vladimir Putin when he was the mayor of Moscow or of St. Petersburg before he was, the president. And he's the one that was meeting with Butina, and he was meeting with the whole, very tied in with the NRA and with, sort of doing these, again, whenever you talk about the Russian collusion, like to me, I immediately go to this Rosneft deal, but also the the this the megatons to megawatts deal, and then of course like sort of losing all the uranium, and it seems like everything ended up in Kazakhstan under the nuclear threat initiative sort of watch with Warren Buffett, opening the uranium bank there. So they throw a lot of characters to distract you, and I just trying to lock you into the ones that keep coming up, because again with like Deripaska, he was the one that took over Glencore, and Glencore was of course Mark Rich's company, and everybody makes a big deal about Mark Rich and getting pardoned by Bill Clinton, but he's gone, and Oleg Deripaska seems to be the one that is sort of taken his position. And I also think that Igor Kolomoisky is another person that kind of took his spot as far as a Mark Rich was known as the king of oil, but also was very into mining for all over. So it's the same the same people, and and again with the FBI side with Andy McCabe and Bob Mueller, they were the ones that partnered with Deripaska to try to get Robert Levinson, who was supposedly captive in Kish Island, and they sort of ran this deal where they were used Deripaska to give 25 million of his own money to try to lift sanctions so he could deal with American businesses, and to try to get Robert Levinson sprung. So again, it's like the same people, and then to have Mueller reintroduced as this sort of hero that's doing this task force with the basically Enron lawyers like Andrew Weissman. I mean, it's the same. So um, I feel like I just repeat it a lot, like on Twitter. I'm trying to learn it in a way that I can, explain it so that it makes sense. Because again, like these names are coming up, like Deripaska's mansion was raided in DC, but also in New York, and I feel like there's a lot of people forget that guys like Manafort and Stone were, they were business partners, and they were basically working, as the trade partners, during the Iran Contra. They were, in the mix with that. And, again, I feel like, they're sort of rebranded as these, victims, but their history is a lot um, deeper, because Manafort was also somebody that was really deeply involved with the overthrow in Ukraine. So that's another area that, again, trying to learn that. I was posting about the Azov Brigade, which was Kolomoisky's sort of his Blackwater, but it ties into Burisma, which is the energy deal. And then of course, if you when we talk about the Belt and Road, and ideally, yes, I agree. If there's great way to move resources around the world, and it works great, um it's wonderful. But the problem is that the history is that they want to have total, full spectrum dominance of the supply and the demand, and then they also want to be able to turn on, to squeeze you. Ukraine has a long history of sort of being the central hub of the pipelines, from Russia and from the Middle East into the European markets. And the prices are really inflating right now, and they've have a history of sort of using that as a as a form of warfare, to it's more economic warfare, but I feel like it is it's the same thing with sort of the Suez Canal. That's always been a choke point that they've sort of used as a way to just dirty dealing is what I think it is. They try to make it look like natural events, but I think that with a lot of this stuff, they just want to be able to control the control supply, and then they have their Rand Corporation to come up with a million excuses that you have the leaders saying inflation is good, and that there's so much demand, and that's the problem. And like literally just all the fundamentals of economics are just sort of thrown out. And again, it's I'm hopeful that people will kind of check that and ask tough questions. But it seems like like even with like a Pete Buttigieg, who's the transportation secretary, it seems like they're really just going into all these sort of um, distractions, talking about his personal life and maternity leave, and um, the equality of transportation systems, when you know I don't know. I mean, to me, it's like you got to have the basics down first before you sort of get into those kind of more specialty type, you know, um, things to be focusing on.
Ukraine has been at the center of our discussions here, and over all kinds of different issues, and certainly going back into World War II, when you had Bandera and the Azov Brigade, and that tradition has been kept alive somehow. How could they keep alive a a blood and soil race based nationalist quasi-Nazi army without the support of governments, without the support of big institutions? And I think that we could include the Vatican in those potential supporters of these armies. They're it's nice to be a pope, and it's nice to be holy and everything, but sometimes you have to do business and take care of things, and they have not had any trouble with extermination campaigns in the past. And uh, this type of army, it couldn't exist if it were condemned by religious authorities in a religious country. It it simply has to be somehow secretly supported. And that the way that you describe the Belt and Road as being a total surveillance system is a really strong and important point. And can we turn all the transportation systems of the world over to a totalitarian uh, authority? I don't know, because as you say, they're going to take a toll. Every every time you cross a border, every time you go over a bridge, every time you change from one uh, economic system to another, every way they can get you, they will take a little tax out of it all the way along. That's predictable, and that's great, great foresight. Um, we have. We have a big problem here in the country, and that is we feel like these people you speak about are living in a different world from the rest of us, and we're detached and we're losing our power. If we ever had it, it's gone. It's slipped away. We're fighting to get it back and exposing the corporate networks, the families, and the corporations. Uh, we've looked at I've looked at Hartford, we've looked at Boston, we looked at New York. Looking at Detroit with you has been really enlightening, and the names that you've offered for us, and the whole idea of American corporations. I mean, wouldn't you think that American corporations would be the last people to support a communist government? And it just doesn't make any sense. Why would the predecessors of our current people have sent so much money and financed the Stalingrad tractor factory in the first place? Um, would you like to offer your thoughts on why did we do it in the first place? Why didn't we just let the whole communist effort dwindle and fail?
Well, I think that there's a lot to be said for the way that I think that you know the history of business and finance in our country, how we think of it, and how it really worked. We had our robber baron era. It's all the whole. When you read older, older, reviews of sort of the buildup into World War II, America was seen as having really being the cutthroat capitalist group, and there were a lot of people that were highly critical of the sort of super capitalist American system. And they talk about how Hitler was fascinated with the Americans' ability to clear territory, of native populations and things like that.
Yeah,
So again, we have we're taught, and again, like, I don't want to rag on America, because there's a lot of great parts, but there's a lot of dark history that gets the Rand Corporation rents, where they make these business leaders as heroes. But someone like Ford has always been so fascinating to me, because he was the one that really, you know he had wrote a lot of the original kind of anti-Semitic texts were Henry Ford, out of the Dearborn Independent. He wrote a pamphlet called The International Jew. He was a very big supporter of the protocols of um, Zion.
yeah, yeah. I've got Tom Gonder from up there your way gave me kindly copies of those the International Jew and some more of Henry Ford's
Yeah.
uh, very very racist material. And
Hmm.
I want to talk about that some night. We should do a whole show on
Yeah.
that, because
I mean, did
to
the
me, it points up one of the things that George Webb has been real good at describing, and that is the difference between your intellectual Jewish folks that really were trying to just be part of the establishment, part of, hey, we go to the same club. We bet on horses at the same racetrack. We see each other at the same functions. And, yeah, sure, we're Jewish, but we're classy Jewish. We're in the elite class of Jewish. And and in the common people that were not educated, that didn't have the benefits of money or society or wealth or family connections or education, these folks were treated completely differently. And to go into the criticism of Henry Ford, I think Henry Ford was really criticizing the financial system that's represented most primarily by the Rothschilds, who happen to be Jewish.
Right.
I don't know if it was you or was it you who was talking about the difference between the uh, the Loeb Kuhn Loeb and the Morgan people who would
Right.
ostensibly not deal with Jewish folks.
Right.
But nevertheless, as you told us last time, they're really working. Both of those firms were working for the same principle, and that principle was, I guess, the Rothschilds.
From it seems like that, at least for America, that was the case, and that they, Kuhn and Loeb was the big, um, Jacob Schiff and the Warburgs. I mean, the Warburgs is another group to really look into. They're supposedly the Del Banco family, going back to the Venetians. Um, an ancient banking group that's deeply partnered with the Rothschilds. With Bank of England, you have the Nathan Mayer Rothschild, but you also have the Norman Montague, who wasn't Jewish. So again, it's like they they and again, you can trace this back. They acquire the newspapers and the PR groups, and you have your Tavistocks that'll help shape it. But they really, will they supposedly bought the Hessian. The Hessian army was
Yeah.
purchased privately by the Rothschilds to go to America. So again, it's like the idea of having like a Blackwater. Um, I don't know. As far as like as Ford, I mean, it's interesting. That he was that. Has that kind of that reputation. But again, he was being, he was financed by the same bankers. And again, it's hard to know exactly what is the real feelings and what was the PR, because again, like as we've talked about, the whole Hegelian dialectic is they want to have half the people think one thing and half the people think the other thing, and whether that's the reality of it or if it's just the way it's done in you have your one newspaper that writes it one way and one writes it the other. It's hard to say, because again, another thing to really, I think, to look at is, Russia was our ally. They were one of the great allies in World War II to get rid of Hitler. Yet, as soon as World War II was over, then they became worse than the Nazis and a bigger threat. We had the whole Cold War over the Russians. So again, like, are these ideas sort of workshopped, over 100 years? I mean, I think there's a lot of evidence for that. I mean, I said before that, like, within banking, or in insurance, the idea is to balance your book and to collect commissions, the vigorish. And that's a long strategy. That's not, making the big home run winner. That is, collecting your vigorish for 100 years, and then you have the whole pile of money at the end of 100 years. And to me, that's the way the strategy works. I think that there's a lot of very inflammatory, media. Even now within, you know, looking at the last couple of years, as far as Russia being this great enemy again with Putin. But again, Putin is, to me, is not the strong man. I mean, it's the same as with China. I'm very skeptical of communist China because they were, um, they were brokering deals with, um, even going back to Herbert Hoover. He was somebody that was working for the English banks, doing coal mining and getting their navy on coal. He was brokering in human you know labor, the coolies. He was the broker for that during the Boxer Rebellion. And then you had, Poppy Bush was the special ambassador to China, and then you had, Kissinger opening China. So again, like, are they sort of a puppet state, or are they, um, you
I'm
know,
with
are,
I'm with the puppet
I,
state theory, and I got to
so,
tell you, I think you're absolutely right. I don't believe in communist China. I think it's another front for them to bounce, fear, to say, oh, and it, I'm, I said I was going to wrap the show up by 9, but here we go over again, and I apologize for interrupting you, but I just wanted to make that point that I the number of people, the percentage of people in this country that think that China is really a threat, that really is an independent, sovereign, saber rattling, we hate America threat, is huge.
yeah,
And the amount of people that are skeptical enough to take even to think that you might be right about that, but I think you're right about it. I
mhm,
mean, especially with Kissinger, and now that gets back to my point about having Eric Prince doing security on the Belt and Road project. I mean, come on, how if you were really an enemy of the capitalist banking system of the evil Americans, you wouldn't let them come in and do your security. And that's what they've done. They've let the supposed great Satan come in and run the security for their biggest economic project in history.
yeah,
So I don't believe them. I I jumped in because I
yeah.
wanted to say, first, I agree with you, and second, I want to. I'm going to have to wrap it up pretty soon because
I mean,
I
I,
I have so many great topics, and I'd go all night if I could stay up, but I don't think I can hang out
yeah,
too much longer.
yeah. Again, I really think that, studying the past is very helpful, because when you say like a name like an Eric Prince, I do think of him as a Dutch, East India guy. And, I talked about how Hudson's and the Hudson Motor Company were a Dutch owned entity. The Fisher brothers tried to buy Hudson Motor, and it actually got blocked by Beatrice, who, again, her grandson was Bernard, that started the World Wildlife Fund with Philip in England. And so are these just is it just the old East India Company with is it now called Council for Foreign Relations, and the Chatham House in England? And did they sort of have this strategy at the end of World War I that, like, okay, we're going to get rid of the idea of having these imperial trade companies, and now we're just going to be these sort of foundations that are kind of think tanks that aren't in the open, and will use people like a Blackwater to sort of do our dirty work. But is it still the old systems? I say yes, I think it is. And for whatever reason, Detroit, sort of being on that old um, fur trade the connecting of the St. Lawrence to the Great Lakes to the Mississippi. That's just an old trade route. And I feel like the same, sort of the same groups are financing it, and they rebrand themselves. But as far as having like a Russia as being this great enemy, or China, like, I mean, I grew up in the wrong time for that, because for me, like, I remember China being, or Russia being, like, you know again, like, from the Olympics or whatever, being this scary country as like a little kid. But then then the Berlin Wall falls, and then you have Yeltsin, who's just like a clownish figure, at that, sort of, they go bankrupt. And so to go from the idea of being this bankrupt country where everybody's so poor. And of course, growing up in Detroit, we had the Russian five hockey players that came from Russia to play, and they did a lot of human interest stories about their poverty and growing up in communist Russia and how awful it was and how grateful they were to be able to play hockey in America. But again, I just didn't think of them as being this like powerhouse country, but they sort of ran the exact same PR from World War One to World War Two, because with the Dawes Plan after World War One, the German Empire had been crushed. They were their reparations were the worst, unpayable with the Dawes Plan. And then whatever 13 years later, that now you have Hitler, who's got the greatest war machine ever seen. So they go from being this bankrupt Weimar Republic where they're, showing wheelbarrows of money, to buy a loaf of bread, to all of a sudden they have the greatest fighting machine ever created. So, it's hard because people have very personal connections to all this stuff, and it's you believe, you hear the stories, but I'm skeptical on it. I don't I think the problems are real, and it is terrifying, especially with the rhetoric as far as like going to war, because again, it's not a lot of damage can be done, and the history is that you don't need a real material reason. You just need to have a PR event, and then they promote it a certain way, and it scares everybody. And we're in a hard environment because we've been locked down, and nobody really knows what's going on with the with the COVID. And so it's a hard situation, because it is, there's a lot of, we talked about Machiavelli and Sun Tzu earlier, and they use those tactics, and people are, it affects your day-to-day life right now. And so people are really you always, people were trained to pin it on one bad person, or one group. And so it's hard, because it's a hard sale to go against basically the whole Rand Corporation, and this SCL group, the Cambridge Analytica, which is the British sort of PR group that is partnered with our intelligence or PR people. And again, it just goes back to the old relationship of with the SOE, the BSC, and the OSS, sort of the British and the American intelligence, partnering up from World War II. And then those characters we've talked about, Donovan and Stevenson and Dulles, and with Kissinger in there as the translator. It's that you can connect it, but it is I look at the way I see it is it is the and again, I don't even know if the royals of England have any real, they put Charles up, to with this kind of Green New Deal, talking about that. But I don't, is he really somebody that the real one calling the shots? I'm skeptical of that also. I just, in the book, the books we've been listening to, they said that Queen Elizabeth's father was, they said he had the speech impediment. They did the King's Speech. They said he was partially retarded, and I don't know that, but they said they brought him in basically because his brother wouldn't attack Germany, and they needed somebody that they could get to attack Germany for the World War II plan. So again, it's like, I don't know all the history of that stuff, but is, it's, to me, it seems like the ones to watch are this, SCL, the Cambridge Analytica, the Rand Corporation, and then of course the think tanks that we've talked about, like Carnegie and Rockefeller and Brookings, and the Hoover Institute out at Stanford. I feel like are really the ones that are brokering these sort of big energy deals.
Well, thank you so much, David. I don't know if I'll ever believe that I can grasp as much in an hour and 15 minutes as you can give us to share. But it's really it's stimulating intellectually, as well as I think it gives me a lot of hope, because somebody like you can communicate things that I can't communicate, that you can explain things that I can't explain. You have a tremendous expertise, and I think that as we develop with you and other people, we're going to present a really professional takedown of what's going on in this world, in this country, and show people in a way that it can't be denied that we've got to drain this swamp. It's impossible for us to, for me to imagine a happy life for humanity in the future if we don't stop this nightmare that's going on. And that's why I'm so grateful that I've met you, and that you are willing to share your experience and your knowledge, and plus you just have a great little noggin on your head there that you can think things through. So and and I really enjoy it. So David, Underdown, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We've got a lot of topics to look further into. You pointed at me in a number of great research directions, and we'll get back together again in a couple more weeks if that's all right with you.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody. Thanks for being with us. Everybody, have a great evening, and I'll see you tomorrow night. And thanks again, David Cranmer, Underdown from what's that town in
Birmingham.
Birmingham? There's no ham like Birmingham.
Yep.
All right. Good night, everybody.